Hi, I'm Amanda Curtin. I'm a writer of fiction. I write novels and short stories. I also have been a freelance book editor for a good part of my life. Sometimes I teach writing and editing also, and I'm a board member of writingWA. I think I was always a writer when I was a child, but I really started writing seriously about 15 years ago. I wanted to do some writing units as part of a degree I was doing at ECU. I thought that would help me to be a better editor. I was wanting to put myself on the other side of the red pen, if you like, to occupy that what I knew to be a vulnerable space, and to see what that was like to have my work scrutinised, reviewed, edited. I thought it would make me a better editor, and I think it did, but it also reminded me, I suppose, that writing was something I really wanted to do, and that's been a major part of my life since then. It's good to find out what you want to be when you grow up, when you're actually grown up. writingWA is the peak body for writing and associated activities in Western Australia, and it helps to foster literary talent, also to develop markets for writers and Western Australian books, bringing writers and readers together by sending writers out into the libraries, schools, regional centres and so on. And also to help promote books and particularly Western Australian books as important to who we are as Western Australians, part of the culture. Things that spark my interest, that I keep going back to, that turn out to be the things that I want to explore in fiction. Often something that I've found in an old newspaper article, for example, or even a feeling that I've got at a certain place. It was one of those things that led me to write The Sinkings way back in the early 90s, I think it was. I was editing the introduction to the Convict Dictionary, and one of the editors happened to mention to me that of all the convicts that were sent to Western Australia, then Swan River Colony in the middle of the 19th century, all of them were supposed to be men. That was part of the agreement between the colonial government and the British government. And she said to me, but you know, one might have been a woman. And that just really fascinated me, and I always thought that I would read a book about that one day. And when I didn't, I decided to write a book myself and to investigate what this was about. And it turned out she was referring to human remains that had been found just outside Albany in 1882 at a lonely campsite called the Sinkings. The Sinkings was a place where there was a well, and sandalwooders would go, who were on their way to and from Albany with a sandalwood load, would stop there and water their horses or their bullocks. And these bones were found at the Sinkings. The body had been decapitated, dismembered and possibly disemboweled, and body parts were scattered in shallow graves around the Sinkings. When the first bones were found, the surgeon who was doing an autopsy, he was working at that point just with the torso, and he declared that this was the body of a woman. But a few days later, it seemed like the whole of Albany went out to the Sinkings looking for body parts of this poor unfortunate. And interestingly enough, the head was found, and a lot of people recognised the head, even though it had been in the ground for a month by that point, recognised that this was Little Jock, a male sandalwood carter and a former convict to Western Australia. And the surgeon suddenly was faced with a dilemma. He had already declared that this was a woman. So he backpedaled, he said he'd used the wrong measures, he'd made a mistake. When I went back to the records though, in the State Records Office, I discovered in the correspondence with the Colonial Secretary's Office that he was never really convinced that this was the body of a man, even though he declared that it was a trial of the murderer. So this was a mystery. It was those what-if questions. What if Little Jock was a woman? What if the surgeon was right the first time? And what I'd started to think of was, what if this was not actually a woman, but a person genetically female, but with virilized genitals and male secondary sex characteristics, someone that today we would call intersex, and back in the 19th century would have been called a hermaphrodite. So this was what I decided to speculate with in the sinkings. When I started my research into intersex, I discovered how intersex infants had been treated in our time in the 20th century. Basically, that was a protocol where in the very early stages of the infant's life, they would be surgically altered into the gender that the doctors decided was most appropriate. Usually that was the default position of being female. Parents were then told to take the child home and socialise them very rigidly into male or female. And this was to be done quite rigidly without anyone knowing that the child's original birth. And kids were not told much either as they were growing up. So a lot of intersex people testified as they became older that they had been subject to life-changing, irreversible surgery at this early age where they could not contribute to the decision, and indeed without their consent, and felt that they had grown up in an atmosphere of lies and secrecy and shame, and that they'd not been worthy of unconditional love in the bodies that they'd been born in. So I found this tremendously compelling, tremendously moving, and I wanted to weave those two stories together, the story of a 19th century person and what we had been doing in our time with intersex people. And The Sinkings was born in that way, a historical mystery embedded into a modern story of that involved ethical issues, social issues, the way that we as a society deal with difference, people born with difference, living with difference. I like to look at the way the past affects the present, and I like to feel that in what I write, it enables a reader to step into the skin of someone else, to feel what it is like to be, in this case, the Sinkings, born with difference and live that way. I feel that this it has the potential anyway to create empathy, to encourage empathy in people, to invoke compassion, which is, I think, why a lot of people write, and certainly why a lot of people read too. In working with an editor, we can work on many different levels, but we're always looking to improve the manuscript, to maximise the potential of what a writer really wants to say. And sometimes that can involve asking a lot of questions, because we as editors step into the reading role really, and we are responding as a reader is going to respond to the work. So asking questions of the author can bring forward really a lot of things that they want to develop further. So we are looking at ways that to maximise what they've got and to develop it develop what they want to say and the best way that they can say it to a reader. The best piece of advice I think I can give to young people who want to write, or anyone who wants to write for that matter, is to read. I think it's so important to absorb all different kinds of writing, to read widely, I think this is the way that we learn the rhythm, the way sentences are put together, the way people construct a narrative. And this is always what I tell young people in my classes, and I think I get a bit concerned sometimes that they feel that reading widely is going to, they sometimes use the word infect what they write themselves, but it's not like that, I don't think at all. I think reading is one of the ways that we develop as writers, by absorbing good writing, good narrative, good structure, all of those things that make us want to read. The success is very much in the doing. A lot of the questions you get, what do I do to write? Well, number one thing is you write. You write, dedicate yourself to it, immerse yourself in it. You also do your homework. You learn about the industry that you want to enter. and you read what other people are writing, and these are the things that that come together to make a writer. But a writer is a writer. It'll come through, but first of all you've got to write.